You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello and welcome here to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, the Rockies affiliate of Fans First Sports Network. I am your host, Skyler Timmons, joined here by my co-host, cohort, and brother in misery, Evan Lang.
Hey, Skyler.
Yes?
Who is a Mountain Lion's favorite actress?
Oh no, not this again.
Come on.
I don't know. I'm playing with the part.
Puma Thurman.
Boo! Boo earns!
That's what the Rockies have reduced me to. Because it's getting so hard to find things to talk about with this team. Because really, it just seems like every week we're playing through the hits of saying the same thing over and over again. And it's getting even harder to figure out what to write about because this team is just so bad. So here's what you get. You get some terrible jokes.
Yes, and we're going to take a page, and we may take a page out of our good friend of the show, Paul Holden's book. One thing we love about Paul, he brings the fire, and hopefully we can channel some of that. He brings the rage when we need it, Evan, and we always appreciate Paul for that.
Because you know what else is a terrible joke, Skyler?
The Star Wars prequel trilogy?
I was going to say the 2024 Colorado Rockies offense.
Oh!
Yeah, that's true, too.
You know, I actually, as I've grown older, like many people, prequel's not as bad as people make them out to be. The sequels, on the other hand,
I think people soften on those as well. But yeah, as now that it's been 20 years essentially since
memes redeemed that trilogy.
Since episode 3 came out, I've softened on those films a bit. I mean, they're not good. Let's be perfectly blunt there, but they're not as bad as they were really made out to be. And I think it's because a lot of work was done behind the scenes to kind of make that whole storyline kind of palpable. You had a lot of the TV series, you had a lot of comics and books and the new expanded universe stuff that replaced the old expanded universe stuff. But people have really softened on that, and that's something. At least they're watchable movies. They're not great. And you can certainly enjoy some of the dumber parts of them. Like, why is there a 50s style diner?
Exactly. Oh, goodness. Or why is there an elaborate plot to kill Padme that ultimately results in, let's send a worm through a window?
We were talking about this before we started recording. It's just a ridiculous chain of events where, and spoilers if you haven't seen this 20-year-old movie trilogy, Emperor Palpatine wants to kill Padme, but he doesn't want to do it himself. So he has Count Dooku do it. But Count Dooku doesn't want to do it himself, so he hires Jango Fett, who doesn't want to do it himself, so he hires Zam Whistle, who doesn't want to do it themselves, so they hire or use a little robot that doesn't want to do it itself, so it injects 2 big poisonous worms into the window. And through all of that, it doesn't really matter, because their entire plan still works off without a hitch, without Padme getting killed. So why did they need to have her killed to begin with?
It was all a plot to draw Anakin in, because he knew about his feelings for her. And then Anakin's like, I dream about you. She's like, get away, creepo. And he's like, and then she loves him by the end. So plenty of dumb stuff, but unfortunately, Evan.
I hate sand, but you know what I love? Fascism.
Pretty much. But unfortunately, we can't talk about we can talk about the Rockies. Can't talk about Star Wars for the next hour or so. We could, but maybe people would tune in for that.
I could fill an hour with Star Wars talk.
Extra podcast series, we'll start talking about Star Wars. But no, we have to talk about the Rockies. And Evan, this team is bad. And so I'm getting the paper bag hat out. Property of Home Depot. There we go. The embarrassed fan with a paper bag on their head.
You know, you're supposed to you're supposed to write something on it or like draw a frowny face. It's not just supposed to be a blank Home Depot bag.
That works. Because at Home Depot, they can build something. But the
But the
Rockies, who knows
Rockies
what they're doing.
can't.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. So we're just going to do the podcast like this for the rest of the time.
You know, the audio's not that bad with that bag on your head. I'm a little surprised that it's relatively cromulent in terms of sound quality.
Yeah. I had to yell really loud through the bag. But no, for the sake of the video, we'll keep it off. But just imagine both of us wearing paper bags on our heads out of embarrassment for this team, which, as of recording, are now 7-21.
Yeah.
On the season.
21.
Second consecutive year where the Rockies have started off the first month with 20 losses. And this is combining March/April. It's always weird when you try to determine records. But between the 2 months, the start of the season, they've lost 21 games. And no signs of anything getting better, Evan. I think that's...
And they truly are at the bottom of the league right now. There are only two teams in all of Major League Baseball with worse records. It's the Chicago White Sox and the Miami Marlins. And both of those teams only have one less win than the Rockies do at this time, which is the Rockies have 7 wins, and both the Marlins and the White Sox have 6. Making things even worse is the fact that the Rockies and the Marlins are the only two teams in all of baseball that have yet to string together consecutive wins and have yet to win a series. The Rockies came close with a series split against the Padres last week, but that's really all they've got is a series split. And yeah, the series split was definitely more fun than a lot of the other baseball we've been watching here, but it's still not even consecutive wins. This team can't win 2 games in a row.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's that big of an ask.
Well, here's the even bigger thing of they were down in Mexico City, part of this thing that we can get into, but not only can the Rockies not string together 2 wins in a row, they can't hold a lead in a game as they have now trailed in 28 consecutive games to begin the season. They've trailed at some point, tying the 1910 St. Louis Browns in the modern era for the modern era record dating back to 1900 and whatnot. They can't hold a lead, Evan. It's always coming from behind.
It's not even holding a lead, though, because to hold a lead, you have to have a lead at some point. And 9 times out of 10, they don't have that. They are starting from behind every single game because they're giving up runs in the first inning.
Or they get the lead, and then it's quickly erased and then some in the next top half of an inning or something. So it's just all around just a bad team. We're having hard times figuring out a little bit insider baseball when we're planning our episodes. We have to, okay, what do we talk about? And we like to try to cover everything there is. But it's been tougher this season, especially when we're trying to write stuff too. It's hard to have things positive to talk about with this team because they're in such an awful place across the board that it's pretty miserable.
And the Colorado Rockies are they're one of the worst first inning. They're one of the worst teams in baseball, period. But they're one of the worst first inning teams in baseball, where they only have 106 total runs in the first inning so far this season, but they've given up 37. And that's just regular runs. In 28 innings pitched of the first inning, they have a league-leading ERA of 11.89, a whip of 2.36, and a batting average against of 363. Meanwhile, 21 walks to 19 strikeouts and 11 home runs. They are the worst first-inning team in baseball. And when the offense just has no spark and you're constantly playing from behind, what do?
You strike out 15 times in a game.
Yeah, and you lose a lot of ball games, and that is what the Rockies are doing.
Yeah,
I want to borrow a phrase from And if you're familiar with the old Cleveland Browns video from maybe 15 plus years ago, The Factory of Sadness by Cleveland comedian Mike Polk Jr., to borrow the phrase from that, we weren't expecting you to be good, we just wanted you to be watchable. That's where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. The bar has been set so low for this season that they've managed to fall beneath it still here to begin the year. And I'm not sure where to begin with everything. But I think the big thing, Evan, is we know pitching, that's kind of an evergreen thing for the Rockies. But the one thing that really stuck out this weekend as they went to Mexico City as part of the MLB World Tour to play against the Astros, who had the same record coming in to the series and have been one of the surprisingly worst teams in baseball in terms of record. They still got a lot of good offense and everything, and pitching's slowly coming back together. But coming a team in a rough spot, and the Rockies get absolutely outplayed 7,300 feet above sea level.
And it was embarrassing, too, because the Rockies in the first game against the Astros, there was this play where Elias Diaz hit essentially a single, and Brenton Doyle was called out instead of scoring because allegedly, as he was rounding third, he didn't touch the bag. If you look at the replay, it looks like Brenton Doyle's is literally tripping over the bag as he rounds it, but they called it in the Astros' favor, overturned, no run, Doyle is out. And the Rockies have the nerve and come out to say that that was the tone changer for that game, a game they lost 12-4.
Well, Evan, at the time,
one run was not the difference in that game. A game that they struck out 14 times.
Well, they were trailing 4-2 at that point. And that would have made it 4-3, and they would have been hitting with 2 outs still.
Oh, was that going to stop the Astros from having a 4-run ninth inning?
Yes. Yeah, and I think it was an ugly series down in Mexico. It was, get the positives out here, Evan. Mexico, it was cool that they were able to go down there. Rockies have the history with Mexico. Obviously, Vinny Castilla, the greatest slugger Mexico's ever produced. We also had Jorge De La Rosa, one of the top pitchers from Mexico ever in terms of wins, and I think overall just performance. And awesome stuff. We were able to celebrate them, go down and celebrate the growth of the game there. Alan Trejo got to play in front of family and friends down there. A beautiful ballpark, atmosphere. It looked really fun.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been a fun atmosphere to be down there.
Tremendously cool ballpark. What is it? Estadio Alfred Helú Harp, or Alfred Harp Helú, I think it is. Relatively new ballpark down there. It was opened in 2019. Really nice stadium. I was very, very impressed with it. It's where the Mexico Diablo Rojos play in the Mexican League. Very, very cool ballpark. It looked like it was a lot of fun. We had some cool stuff happen. Like Cal Quantrill was the first Canadian pitcher to pitch in Mexico. And he did a pretty cool interview today about that with the ESPN folks. But if you were a Rockies fan, you didn't have a whole lot of fun that series.
We had fun for about 1 inning, maybe 2 innings.
I'd give it 2.
Yeah.
The bottom of the second in game 2 and the bottom of the first in game 1.
There you go. But just an ugly, awful series. And coming in, people are, oh man, in Mexico, and like you're gonna have the Rockies there who play at Coors Field, and the Astros, like you expect a ton of runs and home runs. Well, part of that was true just for one team, as the Rockies struggled to score anything, and ultimately, Astros just kept popping off home runs. Rockies had one home run from Ryan McMahon. That was it. One gosh dang home run. That's it.
While the Houston Astros had 3 each game, totaling 6.
There you go. So cool experience, but I think overall it highlights a problem with the Rockies that we'll probably spend quite a bit of this episode talking about. Is that the offense is just a mess, Evan. is across the board, they're not hitting. They can't hit for average, aside from maybe a couple of guys. They can't hit for power, which is the big thing. And oftentimes, they just can't hit the ball, as they are one of the leading strikeout teams in baseball. They top the National League easily. And I haven't checked the current updated stats, but I'm pretty sure they're really close to overcoming the two teams that are ahead of them in the American League.
So after today's games, the Rockies are 2 behind the Cincinnati Reds in the National League. The Rockies have 277, the Reds have 279.
Ooh,
and then the 2 top teams in the American League for strikeouts are the Mariners with 288 and the Athletics at 284. So yeah, that's pretty darn close.
Mm-hmm. And we're closing that gap pretty quickly every game when we're striking out double digits.
And yet all 3 of those teams ahead of us in strikeouts have better records.
What?
It's just what it.
And this is my thing is, we're talking as fans right now. We try to be journalists too and writing stuff. But the beauty of this podcast is we get to kind of do it as fans and talk as fans too. It's been miserable to watch this team at the plate every single game, where aside from maybe like Brenton Doyle and Elias Diaz, even then, like everybody has looked awful a lot of the time at the plate. And I don't know whether it's like via approach, whiffs, ugly swings, fouling off pitches that should be clobbered, watching called third strikes, everything. It's just been miserable to watch this team try and hit because it's very uncompetitive, where if we go down by 1 run, it feels like the game's over, that we're not going to be able to crawl back. And I don't know if you've have this same sentiment at all, or...
No, the moment you go down, it feels like the game is over.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be clear, there are some players who are hitting very well. And, you've got your guys, you've got, your Brenton Doyle, who's leading the team right now in batting average and several other categories, but is still striking out a ton. But we've talked about this before, where if you're at least getting on base, if you're getting results with your hits, then the strikeouts aren't so bad. But he's one of those few people who fall into that category. And then you've got other guys like Elearis Montero. His plate approach is legitimately very good right now. He's not striking out. He's drawing an okay number of walks, not above league average or anything, but better than the majority of the team. But then the problem is he's not producing at all.
Mm-hmm. Or when they talk about a stat today where he's leading the league in like hitting into double plays, like ground ball double plays, because he's smoking the ball, but it's a ground ball right at a guy, and quick 5-6-3 type of thing, where there are those guys that have those positives, but even they're still suffering from the overall offensive problems of this team, where it's uncompetitive. And we'll get the false Oasis hopes of, they put up a 5-run inning. Well, I want those runs spread across throughout the game. I don't want it just in one inning. Like, show me you can score multiple runs in the first, do it again in the fourth, add some more in the seventh, cap it off in the eighth again. Like, string together some stuff, but they're just not doing that. It's mostly confined to one inning. Okay, hopefully we can get enough to score the runs.
And there's just so much momentum killing too, and that's what's going on with Elearis Montero. Those double plays, he's tied for the 3rd most grounding into double plays in all of baseball right now, and he had 1 or 2 today against the Astros, where the Rockies had 7 hits today. They didn't draw any walks, but they had 7 hits, and they only scored 2 runs. And we had that the other day. I'm trying to remember which game it was, where Bud Black after the game was like talking about, we're hitting and we're getting on base, but it was a game where the Rockies only scored like 2 runs the entire game.
And that I think highlights one of the biggest problems is there's no power. There's absolutely no power coming from this team overall. Like when they can hit the ball hard and get good solid contact for hits, like yeah, we can get some doubles. I think we were doing good to start the season in doubles, but in this day and age, Evan, the double isn't going to win you ball games. Simply getting hits isn't going to win you the ball games. It's the types of hits you're getting. Namely, can you hit the ball over the fence? The Rockies cannot do that.
Yeah, the Rockies are tied for the third fewest home runs in all of baseball. They're tied with fellow bottom feeder, the Miami Marlins, at 22, and only the Chicago White Sox and the St. Louis Cardinals have fewer at 18 apiece.
Yeah, and the Cardinals have been abysmal, but the home runs you can trust. Like, okay, the Cardinals, they'll figure it out. They're just off to a horrendous offensive start for the
and
year,
they're
but
still at least winning games.
Yeah,
I think the Cardinals are only like a game below 500 right now.
Yeah, something like that.
And they're 13 and 15 so far, which, is disappointing if you're a Cardinals fan. But think about it this way. The Rockies are 7 and 21. The Oakland Athletics, the openly tanking Oakland Athletics, who have sold off all of their best players for parts, who have benched their few good players early in the season, who are actively not trying to win baseball games, have a better record than the Colorado Rockies.
Mm-hmm.
Have 5 more wins than the Colorado Rockies do.
Says a lot.
Allegedly trying.
Mm-hmm. It's just a circus of errors, I think, in a lot of things. And the part that we'll probably have to bleed into our second segment is just where's the accountability with all of this? Because this team is doing horrendously. And I know the guys are pressing, they're trying to do their best, but this is an organizational failure at the big league level. Because you can look at the minors, which we both do. I bet there's a lot of good success happening down there. You can see good at bats. You can see other things of that nature of, okay, strikeouts, yeah, probably a problem in parts, but there's still some good offensive output coming from guys in the minors. But then as they get closer and closer, and then you get to the big league team, it's just awful. It's not working for anybody. And I don't want to sound super mean or negative, but it's pathetic. Like, it's a very lethargic, pathetic offense that it's just not working. And I don't necessarily put all the blame on the players. They have their part to play in it, where they still have to execute. They have to figure something out and adjust. But it's coaching and front office. Really, that's the biggest failures for me, as a fan or whoever looking at a team of, okay, who's leading this group? Who's in charge of making sure these guys are the best they can be? And why aren't they doing it? Because good coaching and a good front office, you can turn anybody into a good team. These are good athletes. Like, all these guys have talent, but it's just not being realized. And no, that's really on the organization.
Yeah. And I have some to add on that, but we'll talk about it after we do our first ad break.
Yeah.
Of just, there is talent on this team, but it's not being utilized at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll continue this conversation, a very special, somber episode. Is this our Mexico soap opera telenovela?
Yo tengo un burro.
Oh, sí. Affected by altitude, whatever it is in Spanish. We'll be right back in just a moment after this break. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. We're talking about the Rockies offense and just the struggles it has and just how it's been unable to capitalize or really, I guess, take advantage of the talent it does have on its roster. Because I think you and I both agree, like, a lot of these guys on the roster, they're very talented, natural athletes with a lot of potential and talent. It's just not coming through.
Yeah, and Skyler, we were actually talking about this a little bit earlier today, is, and this is something that you had said, is that the Rockies rely primarily on natural talent. But the thing is, natural talent is only going to get you so far. Like this is something that you said to me earlier. The problem is natural talent can get you to the big leagues, but it doesn't guarantee that you'll stay and have success. Natural talent can only thrive when you have the tools and the system in place to take the raw material and craft it into something sustainable. And that's the thing, is the Rockies can't seem to do that. We see all throughout the farm system this incredible talent that a lot of our young guys have. We see on the major league roster, these are talented guys. You know, these are big league ball players. But the Rockies just organizationally do not have anything to craft that talent into long-term sustained success. And it goes from the bottom all the way to the top. It starts in the farm system and it goes all the way up to the big league organization, where you've got, you know, our owner, Dick Monfort, saying that any outside ideas wouldn't work because we've either tried them already and it didn't work, which, you know, citation needed, or he just knows they wouldn't work at all.
Well, and I think, look at what the Baltimore Orioles just did. They called up Jackson Holliday, who just stormed through the minors. Like, it was incredible. Raw, natural talent for this kid. It helps when your dad was a very successful big leaguer, too. And he's had these resources, and he plows through the system. Number one prospect in baseball. Makes his debut, and it didn't go very well for him. It was like a 0.39 batting average, something close to that. Like one hit, a couple of runs scored. 20 years old, not very good. Clearly overmatched by major league pitching. Okay, Orioles like, okay, we need to see really what he's plowed through the minors, which it's pretty easy to be like, it can be really easy to, like, oh man, this guy's just dominating the minors. He's going to be great at the big league level. There's a pretty big gap between AAA and MLB, hence why there's still the proverbial quadruple A type of player getting over that gap. And they see Holiday, okay, he's overmatched, but now he knows what he needs to do. He's seen it. He's been overmatched. Now he knows what he needs to work on back down in AAA. It doesn't feel like the Rockies would have that capability of bringing a guy up and giving him the tools to work around and become successful to overcome. Because we see it with Tovar and like Doyle. They gave them these pointers of, okay, make these little adjustments. And like Montero too, Doyle makes the batting adjustments. Okay, he's getting more balls in play. That's good. He's getting on base. But there's still a lot of problems, like you mentioned, of strikeouts, where they just look overmatched on a lot of pitch selection and swings.
The one who probably is the worst at all of this is Ezequiel Tovar, who had some truly atrocious swings during this Mexico series, where, and it really feels like for a lot of this team, but Tovar exemplifies it, if you put a breaking ball low and outside or in the dirt, these guys are going to swing at it. And I said this on Twitter the other day, is it just feels like the Rockies' sole hitting philosophy is swing at everything, and maybe you will get lucky and put the ball in play. That's what it feels like right now. And, you know, the general manager of the Baltimore Orioles admitted and talked very candidly about, you know, we called up Jackson Holliday and it did not go as planned. And we had to try and figure out, you know, how long do we give him up here before we need to send him back down? You know, they send him back down and given him things to work on. And we'll see how it goes next time. But I just feel like we don't really hear the Rockies talk about what guys need to work on, what needs to change, and how they're going to change it.
They just need to play better, Evan.
And it's very telling about the organizational philosophy that there's a lot of saying, but not a whole lot of doing.
Yeah, the Rockies are really good at talking the talk, but when it comes to walking the walk, especially because they don't walk very much, it's just a lot of empty words. No, just corporate speak. Oh, there's resilience in these guys. They're good. They're gonna battle back. Like, no, I want to hear what you're actively trying to do as a team. You know, to try and get better.
Yeah, and it's it's so tough because the Rockies talked this tremendous game about two strike counts and changing approaches, needing to take more walks, needing to strike out less, watching pitches better, being more productive at the plate with hitting coach Hensley Mullins. And for all of that talk, we've really not seen a whole lot. The Rockies are at best middle of the pack on two strike counts. They've got a team OPS on two strike counts of 491, which is something like a 19th best in the league right now.
Mm-hmm.
And on two strike counts, they strike out some of the most in the entire league.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come back. They don't fight back into it. Here's a good thing to look at is walks with two strike counts. The Rockies are middle of the pack in that. They've drawn 52 walks with two strike counts. But then they're still striking out a ton. They're not hitting home runs at all, basically. But everything they do in two strike counts is just kind of okay. The major thing that they've got is that they're tied for like fifth for hits in two strike counts. Because there are some guys who are getting the ball in play.
Mm-hmm.
But then they also don't do anything with those hits. They don't score runs. They don't drive people in, really. It's tough because like for a lot of these things, they're at best middle of the pack. We just really haven't seen any improvement. And meanwhile, they're not hitting in any count. They're not hitting home runs. They're not really doing it. There's just something completely broken about the offense. This failure to get the big hit, this failure to drive guys in or have big innings or string together runs. Like it feels like how many times have we seen the Rockies have the bases loaded or have multiple guys on base and come away with nothing?
Mm-hmm. So often that's feels like it's been a thing for years and years. And like I mentioned, the first part of it, we've seen these glimpses of what they could do if they could string together hits together. We look back at the 6-run inning against the San Diego Padres. 8th inning, they're trailing by 5 runs, and what do you know? They string together some hits. They get a big home run from Hunter Goodman, who we'll talk about in the later half of the show. He gets a big hit, and then they just keep stringing together hits, and all of a sudden, we've put together 6 runs here in the 8th inning. Like, you could have been doing this the entire game. Where all of a sudden, you can see in those types of innings, the approach changes late in the game. All of a sudden, we're down in the 8th. We're taking a little bit better at bats. We're getting contact. We're getting our singles. There's just this weird change when they're down by a bunch and it's late in the game and they figure, we can start hitting. Like, no, do that throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Where is this? Like in the 7th or later, the Rockies have an OPS of 711.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's an improvement. Okay. And it's like, I'm scrolling through here because I want to look and see where we're at. In the 8th inning or later, they have the 4th best OPS in the league at 804 and are hitting 276, 361, 443 with 6 home runs, 3 triples, and 10 doubles. Where is this the rest of the game?
Somebody tell the Rockies they can hit against starting pitching. Like, they don't have to wait until a bullpen guy at the end of the game.
And then 9th inning or later, so this is including extra innings, they drop down a little bit, but they've still got some of the best numbers in the league when it comes to that 9th inning. And you just wonder why? Like, what on earth is going on that you can be a pretty decent team in the late innings, in the 8th inning or later, but for the entire rest of the game, you're just terrible. And I've been so frustrated because some of these press conferences. So let's talk about this. Is going back a little bit when the Rockies played the Mariners. Luis Castillo on the mound for the Mariners. Bud Black comes out and says, well, we knew he was going to throw that fastball high. And that's exactly what he did. It's like, okay, so you knew what he was going to do. What did you do to prepare for it? Because he made them look foolish.
Mm-hmm. And
he struck out a ton of Rockies and had a wonderful outing. And they did nothing against him.
And he had been struggling quite a bit up to that start. I think that ties in another thing is it doesn't seem like it doesn't matter who they're going up against. They're going to look foolish at the plate offensively.
We are everyone's get-right team.
Because the Mariners came in.
Hadn't been having that great a series. And since the Mariners played us, they've been on a tear.
Yeah, offensively and down the mound.
The Houston Astros came into the Mexico City series with the same record as the Rockies. Struggling offensively, pitching not doing that great. And we put up a combined 6 runs total against them while striking out like 16 times and only drawing a handful of walks. And I'm really curious to see how we do against the Marlins, who are a bottom feeder like us right now.
Yeah.
Because if we lose that series against the Marlins, it'll show who the worst team is. And I don't have a good feeling about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we joke about it. We're basically the Washington Generals, just doomed to lose.
I thought they were due.
I thought the Generals were due. But it's just this deflating thing. And I know it's probably incredibly difficult on the hitters, on the Rockies, the players, like, because they want to do well. Like, nobody's going up there and like, well, I guess I'm going to suck today. None of them are like that. But what is the organization doing to get through to these guys, connect with them, and help them develop at the big league level? Because development does not stop when they get called up from AAA. Like, it's really the beginning of their true development.
The best players are constantly learning and developing and adjusting throughout their entire careers. And I definitely feel for the players, and I feel for the fans too, and for our listeners, because I know that we're usually more of the haha funny jokes kind of podcast, but we're at the point where we kind of need a little bit of a venting episode like this, because the Rockies are they're really bad.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in our Purple Rose Slack, where you look at a team like the Dodgers and what happens to players, whether it's pitchers or hitters, and they go to Los Angeles and all of a sudden they dip back into the fountain of youth. They find renewed success of some kind. Jason Hayward, JD Martinez, who are like, who knows what they can do still at that age. They come to, Los Angeles, boom, putting up really good numbers. Albert Pujols, a first ballot Hall of Famer who will probably be unanimous. He should be unanimous. And he goes to the Dodgers, and distinctly remember, and they're talking about on MLB Network or something. I think they're talking about with the Dodgers playing the Rockies once, and he was talking about how he's open to learning. He's all in. He wants to learn from the coaches and develop so he can get better. He's open to getting better. And here he is, this 40-some-odd-year-old man who's hit well over 600, who's hit 700 home runs in his career, and he's still looking for ways to get better because he understood, okay, the coaches are here, they can make me better. And that was Albert Pujols, one of the best hitters in baseball history. Could anybody ever say the same about the Rockies? I came to the Rockies and they made me better for my career.
We hear a lot of the opposite. We hear a lot of guys who leave the Rockies and arrive at their new team with new coaching staff and new analytics and new development tools and go, wow, this is something I've never seen before. This is something I've never heard of. This is a tool I've never used. This is a way that I can improve. And we get, as Rockies fans, we get salty when guys like Jake McGee or Yency Almonte or anyone else kind of, poo-poos the Rockies for not having the same things. But it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you go to a different team and they show you all these cool analytics tools and coaching techniques that will make you better as a player, and to have that former player go, wow, this is never something the Rockies would do.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the biggest indictment on the thing as a whole. And we keep, beating the nail on the head. All of this starts and ends with the top of this organization. The owner at the top and the front office, they have to figure something out. Something has to change to fix all of this because we're going nowhere fast. And they're already, bleeding fans profusely. Where you can watch a game, it's pretty barren. Yeah, they'll announce 18,000 people there.
But there's certainly not.
You can look and see, there are not 18,000 people there.
And what I'll say about that is it is tough to truly measure that until we get to the summer where, school's out and people are actually able to go to those weekday games a little bit more. But we've had multiple days now this year where the announced attendance is the lowest that the Rockies have seen for that kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're seeing it all over social media and all over the place. People who are like, I don't watch the Rockies anymore. I don't go to the Rockies anymore. What's the point? And we're dealing with a guy at the top, the owner, who, and I've talked with multiple Rockies fans. I've talked with plenty of other people. To say that Dick Monfort doesn't want to win is misguided. To say he doesn't care is misguided. If you've ever, sat down and talked to the man, apparently it is pretty clear that he is very passionate about the team. It's not just about making money. I know everyone says, oh, he just cares about making money. First of all, he's a billionaire. All billionaires care about is making money. True fact. But you can also tell that he cares about his team and he's very passionate about his team and he does want to win. But as I discussed earlier in the year, he wants to do it his way. He's stubborn. He's very, very bullheaded. He's loyal to a fault. And that causes all of these issues where if Dick Monfort could step away completely from baseball operations and just be, oh, I'm the quirky owner that loves his team and I show up to all the games and I do all this, but I let the baseball people make the decisions. And I spend a lot to bring in good baseball people from all over the league to make sure that this team is competing and firing on all cylinders. And I just want everything to be great for my players, because that's the thing is we know that Dick Monfort is very loyal to his players to the point where if, when a player does not take his side on things, he does feel slighted. Like that's how it all broke down with Nolan Arenado, is that Nolan was mad at the organization and that made Dick Monfort pretty unhappy because, I've been so loyal to you and we brought you up through the farm system and all of that. But then he's the same kind of guy. He's like, oh, I want to win, but we're not going to listen to anybody from outside. We're not going to bring in anybody from outside because their ideas are bad and they would never work, or we've tried them and they wouldn't work. And that's just all so misguided and stubborn of, yeah, I want the Rockies to win, but it has to be my way. I want to be the guy to figure it out. It's me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to not be that, because you know what? Let's look at the Colorado Avalanche. Let's look at an owner who is not actually particularly well liked in sports media, and that's Stan Kroenke. You know what Stan Kroenke does really well, better than a lot of other owners? Nothing to do with the day-to-day sports operations. Mm-hmm. He really only shows up when something important is happening. He doesn't talk a lot. He lets all of the sports people do their own thing and keeps out of it. His son, Josh Kroenke, is a lot more involved with the Avs and the Nuggets, but he also tends to delegate sports operations on a day-to-day basis to sports people. And Dick Monfort does that. And a lot of that you can see is his over loyalty and his stubbornness. I would say the fact that we haven't had a president of baseball operations since Kelly McGregor died over 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Is part of Dick Monfort being too loyal. Is I don't think he wants to pull the trigger and replace Kelly McGregor with an actual president of baseball operations.
Well, I think Kelly McGregor was just team president. And like they've never really had a president of baseball ops, so to say, because that's basically like the GM. But as the club president or team president, he was pretty involved in that. So he basically filled that role.
He was much more involved in baseball operations.
Yeah.
And, he named Greg Fiesel, the team president.
Club president.
But Greg Fiesel has really no involvement with baseball operations. He's a business guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all these, it's all about loyalty and stability. And stability is not a bad thing. But Skyler, you wrote this in your article last week. You can't take stability over change and progress. We have all of these guys who have been in the organization for 20 years, 10 years, lifers. And sometimes you've got to make a difficult decision. And it's frustrating because this team can't seem to do that.
Yeah. And before we close out this segment, that's alluding to, I wrote it for my Wednesday rock pile at purpleroad.com. It was titled The Rockies in Relation to Stability and Change. And this was in 2009 when they fired Clint Hurdle after going like 18 and something. By the end of May, they're 14 games out of first place in the division. And they say, all right, bye-bye, Clint Hurdle. Like, we got to make a change here. And Dan O'Dowd at the time said, as an organization, we value stability more than we value change. And it's like, we're willing to give Clint the benefit of the doubt because he's been with us through everything. He's been the yes company man, hasn't complained. He's been stuck with us through the rebuild. But it was, we went until it felt like we had no choice but to make a change. Right now, the Rockies are at a point where they need to make a change. This is unacceptable what they're doing as an organization, the way it's being operated, the way they're playing, the way their philosophies. Something has to change. Somebody has to be held accountable for the failures of this organization. Somebody has to fall on the sword. That's just the nature of the game, Evan.
Yeah.
Somebody has to fall on the sword eventually.
And the fact that this is an organization in its 32nd season of existence, and they've only fired basically 2 managers. You had Buddy Bell in 2002, and then Clint Hurdle in 2009. And right now, the Rockies are 10 games back of the division to start the year. That number's not going to change. I can guarantee you this team will never be at 500 this year, and they are scuttling along the seafloor with the rest of the bottom dwellers. And we should not be having to sit here and going, why aren't they doing anything? Why is nothing changing? Why won't they focus on fixing things? It's an organization that from top to bottom needs a complete overhaul. And I'm not suggesting you fire every coach on every level because that's untenable. And I do think that there are some good coaching staffs. Who I think is great right now? The Spokane Indians and the Fresno Grizzlies. Their coaching staffs are fantastic. But in the Rockies organization, who do you nail responsibility to? Well, it's everybody, because for the big league team, nothing is working. The offense isn't working. The pitching isn't working. The defense isn't working. They can't hit home runs. They can't score runs. They can't strike guys out. They walk too many guys. They give up too many home runs. They can't capitalize on playing in one of the most offense-friendly parks in all of baseball. They are consistently outscored and outcompeted on every level in every way. What do you do about that? Well, you need to make some major systematic organizational changes.
At some point, a message has to be sent and a spark has to be lit. Because what happened in 2009, they lit a spark. They end up going to have the best season in Rockies history in terms of record and make the playoffs. And it was because they felt, okay, we need to change. We need a change in voice. Somebody needs to be different at the helm. Somebody has to be held accountable. And the players understood that.
They understood more of this mutual parting of ways. We've made this decision, or no more, I've decided to step away, or I'm deciding to resign. No. At some point, you've got to fire people to put out the message that I am not going to stand for. Like, if you're Dick Monfort, I get that you are so loyal and you want your guys to love you like you've loved them throughout their entire career. But if somebody's not doing their job, then maybe that's not a job they should have. If I showed up to work every day and I didn't do my job, or I did a bad job, I would be let go. I would be fired. And that's the same thing that should apply to the big league coaching staff and the big league front office in the Rockies organization.
At some point, a message has to be sent. Accountability needs to be had. And you can look over that roster and okay, it's not working. See ya. Figure something out. But the way it stands, the Rockies have to change.
Yeah.
And they have to fix things. Look in the mirror. Look at the man in the mirror.
In Little Big League, a great movie.
Yeah.
This is not the first time we've made this comparison, where little Jimmy, what's his name? Whoever, I don't remember the main character's name, who is now inherited the Minnesota Twins and has named himself the manager.
Bill Haywood
has to make the difficult decision where one of the old hands on the team lifer, his favorite player, is not performing, and he has to make the decision to cut him. Sometimes you've got to make that decision, and it doesn't feel good to make that decision. Like, it's not going to give you a good feeling in your heart of hearts to go down and fire Bud Black and Daryl Scott and maybe Hensley Mullins or whoever needs to be fired. But for the health of the organization, you've got to.
When you're sick, you got to take your medicine. And the Rockies have got to take their medicine. In whatever way, shape, or form that looks, they got to get with the times. Whether it's a change in personnel, change in tactics, change in philosophies, change in tools available. Something's got to give. Because, hey, it worked out. Bill Haywood rehired that player as the hitting coach after that, at the end of that movie. So it worked out in the end.
And his mom is the real-life mother of Cubs top prospect Pete Crow Armstrong.
Oh, what?
But a neat little tidbit for you.
There you go. This segment ran a little long, Evan.
I think we've been doing pretty good at keeping these short recently. But I think at some point, you know, we're at the end of the month of April here, the first real full month of the baseball season. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something that I think we both needed to get this off of our chests. And hopefully we're not going to have, you know, these rant casts like we have here too much more this season. But
just at the end of every month.
Sometimes you've got to get it off your chest. The way that the Rockies have started this season is bad. It's untenable, and things need to change. And, yes, indeed. We're going to close things out. We have a little bit more to talk about, but it'll be a little bit more on the easy breezy side of just going through general happenings, and then we'll call it a day. We'll have our off day, and we'll hope that maybe things can turn around.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, we'll go ahead and take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll finish things off with general news. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. All right, Evan, the ranting is done. The venting session is over.
Big deep breath.
Why does everybody's back hurt all the time, Evan?
I don't know. This has been kind of an ongoing thing the last couple of years where we've had like a bunch of different guys getting waylaid by back injuries. You know, Chris Bryant is on the IL with a back injury, and we have literally no idea when he's going to be back. He was eligible to be back at the beginning of last week, and that didn't happen. They say that it's not an extensive enough injury to need surgery, which I guess is good, but you know, we don't know when he's going to be back or if he's even going to play again this season. And then now it's Nolan Jones, who my guess is that his back has been bothering him since spring training, which would explain a lot of his hesitancy in counts. You know, he's gone from a guy who was a very good aggressive approach first pitch swinger, and he's now taking very long counts which taking long counts is great, but then he's also not being aggressive on pitches that he should be aggressive at. And because of that, he's not having a particularly good start to the season. We find out his back's been hurting him. He was taken out, and he missed a few games until the Mexico City series. He played yesterday. He played a little bit today, and then was removed from the game today in the 6th or 7th inning for Jake Cave. And my guess is that his back is still bothering him, and I'm really not sure what to do about it. My guess is that he needs to go on the injured list. He needs a good, solid week and change where he is not playing. He is getting well and getting rested.
Mm-hmm. And really stretching. Loosen up that back, baby.
Yeah, you got to stretch.
Mm-hmm. With back injuries are something we can relate to. So,
yeah,
we got to take care of those.
We get it.
Yeah, I turned 28 I just turned 28 as you're hearing this episode. So, my back hurts.
Just wait another 2 years, Skyler. Then everything will hurt.
It already hurts now.
It gets worse.
I'm constantly feeling I need to go on the injured list. But it opens up a weird area where the Rockies are now, because like you said, if he has to go on the injured list, it really opens up a very different looking outfield. Right? We already have Sean Bouchard up. He can stick around. Hopefully, maybe if you have to put well, Brian hasn't even started baseball activities because I guess I don't know. But
Brian is not going to. I'm telling you right now, I don't think KB is going to be back anytime soon. He is just the fact that this was supposed to be a minor back injury, and then he was on the IL, and now we don't know when he's going to be back, and he hasn't even started baseball activities yet. I think that should tell you that he is going to miss significant time. And I said this on Twitter. I have nothing against KB as a person. Frankly, though, I wish and I think it is time for him to just retire. We are now in the third straight season where he's missing a significant amount of time due to injuries. It's clear that his body's not playing like he wants it to. And I think, honestly, it would be better for both parties to just rip the Band-Aid off and go, okay, I'm retired.
Just cut him and let him loose and eat that and let it be a reminder.
Yeah, because either way,
don't pay over-the-hill veterans a ton of money.
No matter what happens, you are paying him that money. There is no way for the Rockies to get out of it. There is no way to not pay it. If he retires, you're paying him. If you cut him, you're paying him. If you trade him, you're paying him.
Yeah.
So just rip the Band-Aid off. Get it done.
Anyways, hey, this wasn't supposed to be our ranting part of the segment.
I don't really think it's much of a rant, because what it draws in is the fact that Chris Bryant going to the injured list opened up actually some space where now we've got Sean Bouchard playing in the outfield pretty regularly, and he's been pretty solid. Some defensive miscues, unfortunately, but that's par for the course with this team right now.
Yeah.
But he's been doing pretty solidly. And I wrote, okay, then it's time for Sean Bouchard to basically be your everyday right fielder until he was proven otherwise. And then I also said, you've got to make a decision between Michael Toglia and Elearis Montero. And it appears they did, because they optioned Michael Toglia and they called up Hunter Goodman. Elearis Montero has been playing first base for the most part over the last week, and he's been doing pretty good defensively. He's been pretty solid. He's made some nice tags. He's not making a ton of mistakes. He's never going to be like a Gold Glove first baseman, but that'll play. And we're waiting to see his new hitting approach translate into results. Hunter Goodman hit a home run his first start since being called up. I'd like to see more of him. And if Nolan Jones goes on the injured list, like you were about to say, Skyler, this opens up some interesting opportunities to shift things around, because we don't want Nolan Jones to be hurt, but we can see Sean Bouchard play in left field and then Goodman in right more often. Or you have Toglia on the roster and Tolia's playing in right field and left field sometimes too, cycling things around. Same with Hunter Goodman, who can play catcher, first base, and outfield. Or, depending on where things go with Chris Bryant, if he goes on the 60-day, that opens up a 40-man roster spot. And we could see someone like Jordan Beck.
Yeah, and before we build into that, let's talk about Toglia real quick. Because Tolia, awesome spring, makes the opening day roster, playing some pretty decent, cycling in at first base outfield, good defender, decent outfielder, pretty dang good first baseman. But then had changed his approach a little bit, and at times was looking good at the plate. But then I don't know if he just fell into old habits or just caught the disease that the rest of the defense or the rest of the offense has, striking out a ton. What he had 5 hits, 4 of them were home runs.
Correct.
So a prototypical 3 true outcomes type of hitter, except he wasn't really drawing the walks and wasn't consistently hitting the home runs and was really heavy on the emphasis of the 1 true outcome, a strikeout.
Yes. Michael Toglia had struck out 20 times in just 15 games and 47 at bats. And you compare that to some of the other strikeout numbers on the team. So the strikeout leader on the team is Ezekiel Tovar with 39. So that's about twice as many in 109 at bats versus Toglia doing it in 47. An on-base percentage of 143 is not gonna work out. And it stinks because you love the power that he displays. When he hits that ball, he hits it real good. But when you've only got 5 hits and 4 of them are home runs, I don't want to say you're not really contributing that much.
It's the type of
you've got a contribution. But at the same time,
at times it outweighs the rest of what you're doing.
Yes.
When they're few and far in between. Whereas we've drawn this comparison, if he could easily be, if he could figure out a way to be more of a Kyle Schwarber, Kyle Schwarber, just impeccable play discipline, because we've talked about before, you throw a meatball to Schwarber, that sucker's out. He does not miss balls over the plate. But you pitch him a little more carefully, he punishes your mistakes. But you can get him to strike out quite a bit, but he also draws walks. So he does it all. Toglia has developed more into current Joey Gallo, where Joey Gallo, barely hits singles, gets a lot of extra base hits when he does make contact, but Gallo strikes out so much. And
here's the difference between Michael Toglia and Kyle Schwarber. In 110 at-bats, Kyle Schwarber has 44 strikeouts, which, yes, is a lot. But he
the course.
But he also has 20 walks, 14 RBI, and 7 home runs. Mm-hmm. So while his batting average is low and he strikes out a lot, his on-base percentage is above 300.
Yeah. It's he does damage where he can, and then he gets on base and lets the guys behind him do the damage.
What's funny is he has no doubles and no triples.
Yeah.
All of his extra base hits are home runs. So his slugging percentage looks bad. It's 391 or something, but you can rely on him to do some damage.
Yeah. Whereas Joey Gallo, barely ever hits singles, but he's got a bunch of, he'll have doubles and stuff, but that slugging still not great, or the average. But even Joey Gallo can draw some walks, even though he'll strike out a ton. Toglia is just not doing that. And so it's still an area of, they got to figure out what to do with him and figure out his place with the team. Because, he's a first rounder and he's had that potential. And we've been rooting for Toglia. But if it was just him, being this type of player on the team, okay, you can stomach it and work with him more. But when he's just one of many in a lineup, it's not really helping out at all.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I like Michael Toglia, and I want him to be a really good big leaguer. And there's still time for him, more than a bunch of the other guys. Toglia will now have 1 option year left, basically, after being optioned. And, I think with some more individual coaching, he could turn things around.
Yeah.
So I don't think all hope is lost on Michael Toglia, but like I said, at some point you got to make a decision. And it does appear that the Rockies at least made their decision for right now of the home runs are great, but it's just not enough of a contribution.
Yeah, it's pretty tough overall, but so he can He went with them to Mexico as the 27th man, but I guess now he'll head back to. Well, it depends on what they figure out to do something with Jones. Maybe he gets to stick around, but hopefully he can get that development here. But this leads back into what you're talking about. If some changes, when do we entertain the thought of calling up Jordan Beck, who has been pretty solid down in Albuquerque to start the year after a very solid spring training? He's putting up some numbers down there in Albuquerque, in the Kirky, as they say.
For Jordan Beck, it's tricky because it's the same. He's very similar right now to Jackson Holiday in terms of he has just torn it up in the minors since we drafted him. And arguably, he's ready to give it a go. But you don't want to rush it too much because you don't want a Jackson Holiday situation where you come up and hit, 0.059 and just are not really contributing at all. But I think if a 40-man roster spot opens up that you would use on a position player, you add Jordan Beck to that 40-man roster.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially in a season like this, there's nothing to lose. And if you need to burn one of his options, as long as you are, careful with when you are using his options, you got nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if Chris Bryant goes on the 60-day injured list, you add Jordan Beck to the roster.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of on the opposite end of I don't want to call him up just yet. I feel like give him that time to really cook and develop and get some good time down in AAA, because I don't want him to fall into the same camp that Montero did when he first called up, where he's barely playing and it just cools him off immediately. I want when they call up Jordan Beck, or really any good top prospects in general, when you call them up, they're there to stay. They're there to really get regular playing time. Whereas the Orioles, they can afford, okay, I could have understood if they held on to Holiday and just let him ride out in AAA most of the time once they sent him down there or something. But I'm afraid when they call up Beck that he would be caught in that fighting for playing time, which is something that Hensley Mulin's kind of alluded to. He's got this talent, but we'll see how that would translate to playing time at the big league level. I'm like, no, if you're calling him up, he's playing every day. He shouldn't have to be fighting for his playing time.
Yeah, you don't need to see how it translates to playing time. And that I definitely agree with. I should readdress, if you're adding Jordan Beck to the 40-man roster and calling him up, he's starting every day or almost every day. I would never want to just call him up for the sake of having him be on the roster. He needs to be playing every day.
Exactly. And so that's where I would be hesitant is right now. I'm not sure with the way the Rockies are doing. I'd let him just sit in AAA until September, even, unless it's undeniable that he needs to come up and he can take a regular playing spot, just because that's the way the lineup demanded. Because otherwise, then you can get your full year of him. It's tricky. So it depends on what's going on with the big league roster, as always. But he needs to come up and be the regular, everyday, right fielder type of thing. So that's the tricky thing with him. As much as I'd love to call him up as soon as possible, it's calling him up when we feel like he can contribute regularly on a basis, which I personally don't trust our current coaching staff to put him in that position.
Which is fair. And it's tough because you're like, well, make it undisputable. But the way a month into the AAA season, when a guy's got a 999 OPS, 18 walks to 24 strikeouts, 10 doubles, 2 triples, 5 home runs, 18 RBI, and is hitting 307, 405, 594.
Mm-hmm.
That sure looks like a guy who might be ready for the big leagues sooner rather than later.
But that's the hard thing when it comes to Albuquerque numbers, because that honestly, pitching in that league is atrocious.
It is, especially with the isotopes themselves.
And
But then,
that's the hard thing to gauge is when can
okay,
you
how'd he
truly tell the
do?
guy?
Well, how'd he do in Double A and Triple A? Oh, pretty darn well, it turns out.
Mm-hmm.
And how'd he do in Single A? Oh,
Pretty dang good.
Pretty darn well, it turns out.
Yeah.
Honestly, the most he struggled so far in his minor league career was when he ended the season last year with Double A Hartford, and he hit 240, 342, 406 for an OPS of 748.
Yeah.
He struck out 71 times, but still drew 30 walks, 5 home runs, a triple, 15 doubles, and stole 9 bases.
How are his strikeouts and walks in AAA right now?
He has 24 strikeouts to 18 walks in 25 games and 101 at bats.
And so that's the thing that sticks out to me is I just want to make sure like he's getting that good like plate discipline, a good walk to strikeout ratio.
He's got essentially a 25% strikeout rate, which is, yes, high.
Why?
But the fact that he's drawn almost as many walks as he had strikeouts is, I think, really encouraging.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that this coaching staff needs to nurture is those walks. Mm-hmm. Drawing walks is good.
So I don't know if I'd call him right away, but maybe like I think like what I mentioned before, or I've always thought is like June at like maybe the earliest. Somewhere in like maybe end of May. Basically the Nolan Jones route they kind of took.
Yeah, I think if
something
he's
like
still
that.
Playing this well through the end of May, I think you have no choice but to call him up in June.
Yeah, and depending on what's going on with everybody else. But
we'll see.
The way the offense is going, full circle, it'd be a pretty easy decision. But we'll see. This team's depressing.
That was fun.
But we'll keep trugging along. But Evan, where can the folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Evan_Lang27. Same handle on the Schwinstagram, though I don't really use it that often. You can find me on Mondays writing the Monday Rock Pile and Pebble Report over on purplerow.com. You can also find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. The same handle for each one at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop. Skyler, how about you? Where can we find you at?
Find me over at purplerow.com, writing the Wednesday Rock Piles. Find me writing stuff for Fans First Sports Network. I'm going to try to branch out, write some more other stuff because I don't like writing the same game recap every night.
Which is the Rockies lost by a lot and struck out a bunch.
Yeah, guess what? The Rockies struck out a bunch. But hey, they hit a home run. Look at how cool this was. But that, and find me over on Twitter at sideline_crowd. Always making them memes. Good stuff. But that'll do it here for this edition of Affected by Altitude. Be on the lookout. Eventually we'll get another Every Rocky Ever out. My brother is very busy with school and other things, so we'll get another one out here soon. Hopefully. Depends. We'll get there, Evan. But until next time, I'm Skyler. That's Evan. This has been Affected by Altitude. Hit him with it, Evan.
Farewell.
Adios.
Deborah. Mom. I got 2 boys. They're twins. It's the new accent we've added to the show, the Ray Romano. No, Ma, Deborah. I was in the movie Ice Age with John Leguizamo.